This is kind of peeling back the onion at O'Reilly here and looking at how we use large language models to build personalized learning experiences. So I'm here to introduce Adam Witwer, Lucky Gunasekara, and Andy Hsieh. First off, Adam leads the product team here at O'Reilly, and he's worked at the company for over 17 years. He loves creating products and experiences that help people and companies level up their technical skills. Lucky is the co-founder and CEO of Miso.ai, where he leads the team's efforts to create new search and discovery experiences that dissolve the barriers between content and readers. With a background in interaction design and user experience research, Lucky collaborates with publishing partners and newsrooms to develop seamless content search and discovery interfaces that are in balance with their editorial and journalistic standards. And Andy is an engineering leader and co-founder and CTO of Miso, where he combines his extensive expertise in machine learning with a pragmatic engineering mindset and astute product sense to create search and personalization systems that elevate user experiences for renowned publishers and e-commerce groups. So, guys, please take it away.
Hi, John. Thank you. Thank you for the nice intro. Hello, everyone. As John said, I run the product team at O'Reilly, and I'm excited to talk to you about how we've been using large language models in our application. So I'm going to share my screen here. And my job here is I am going to basically set up the Miso team by showing what we've already built. So what I'm showing on screen now is something we call O'Reilly Answers. Tim O'Reilly talked about this earlier during his chat, and Tim was actually deeply involved in this project. And so this is available now, and we shipped it in late 2020. The foundation model that we use for this is BERT, and that's exactly what we're going to, that's what Lucky's going to show in detail about how we used it. The Miso team built the APIs. The O'Reilly team built the front end, and we partnered together on it, and we built it out. So just a very simple demo for those of you who have not seen it. Just kind of lay the groundwork here, and then we're going to talk about the direction in which we're exploring where we can take it next. So O'Reilly Answers is at its core a question and answering service that lets you interact with the O'Reilly text content and video content in a way that's different than how you would otherwise interact with that content. So, for example, if I were to do a search, what do I need to know to become a software architect? It comes up, and it basically gives you a little snippet of different previews from different books. So the idea here is, in terms of what are we doing, in terms of how is this different from a normal search experience, we're really trying to foreground the content itself. A lot of search experiences, they will lead with metadata. They'll lead with maybe a book cover or book title, and maybe the publisher, stuff like that. We're trying to lead with the content to get the user right in there so that they can start to interact and find answers to their questions right away. So in this case, we have a number of different snippets. The snippets are also quite substantial. One of the things that Lucky's going to talk about later on in his presentation is we are actually metering and paying royalties on this experience. So even if you're just looking at the snippet and you're scrolling through, the authors are actually being compensated for this right now. And in this case, there are 2 authors to this title. So as you can see, I have a number of different answers here. I can kind of scroll through, kind of get a different sense. There are images and graphs in here. And then let's say, okay, that's actually a video. We're going to come back to that one because I'm going to do a book, and then I'm going to do a video really quickly. Okay, so let's kind of go to, how about this one? How about this one? This one looks good. So the question I asked is, what do I need to know to become a software architect? And this one begins, so you want to become a software architect? That sounds pretty relevant. So I click in, and it takes me to the part in the book. It highlights the piece of text that is most relevant to your question, and then you can continue to enjoy and learn from the rest of the content. So that's a text example, and then very quickly, let's look at a video example. So again, the question I asked is, what do I need to know to become a software architect? And they returned a video here called Meet the Experts by Mark Richards and Neil Ford, maybe some names that you recognize. And this is actually a transcript of the video. And here it starts with the highlighted part. It's like, well, the beginning is, Well, the journey is hard. So this is one of the presenters talking, and if I click through, okay, so it takes you directly to the timestamp in the video. So that's what we built together with the MISO team. And now I'm going to hand it off to the MISO team to talk about where we're going next, what we're exploring as a team. Just a real quick sort of caveat here. This is not a roadmap presentation, what you're about to see. If you're interested, if you're a customer of O'Reilly and you're interested in talking about any of the stuff that you see here, please reach out to your CSM or to the customer service team and say you'd like to talk to one of the members of the product team because you're excited or you want to give feedback. Absolutely. But a lot of the stuff you're going to see today is exploratory. So please take it in that spirit, in that vein. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing. And with that, I am going to hand it over to you, Lucky.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah, just to dive right in. I mean, as Adam was saying, how we really started with the answers engine was from the perspective of really trying to ask ourselves, this was around the time that BERT was released as really one of the first like really significant transformer models, and it was open source. Really tried to ask ourselves, could we get this large language model to really read the books in reference to questions or queries and really start to dissolve the boundaries between the reader and the content, as Adam was saying, to go beyond metadata search and just go directly into the content itself in a pre-digested and almost like snippet highlighted basis. And that's really how we started. And then how we were able to do this was really taking BERT and really fine-tuning it a lot in the first step against millions of coding examples that we aggregated from the open web that were in this question answer format, really to teach it, this is what the type of questions look like, these are what like good answers are structured as, and to sort of build up its familiarity. But the second step we really did not anticipate, but it turned out to be very important, which is really teaching the system and grounding it in the content itself. So all of these snippets that Adam mentioned, they're really references and statements or commentary, and in isolation, you lose a lot of context, right? So we had to really start to situate the snippets in the broader context of what is this statement, what is this commentary in the context of the section or subsection of the book, the chapter of the book as a whole, the author's overall expertise, and really build that into the platform and the approach that we were taking for this. So that was really exciting. At a certain level of proficiency, we did get a large language model to read, but it couldn't write, in all honesty. It could maybe do fill in the blanks, but it couldn't actually write, synthesized or primer or digest-like prose or commentary in response. And then that's really why last year, this question mark came back about writing, of course, because as we looked at the release of GPT-3 and 3.5 and now 4, it's very clear that large language models can indeed write. They could even code, and this step of taking you as the reader even more into the content and giving much more synthesized commentary and analysis towards the questions or searches you might be doing, that's now very possible and very achievable, which is really exciting. But on the other hand, part of what is concerning is, and I'm sure many of us are well aware of this now, part of what's concerning and something that we needed to address thoughtfully was really the three issues on the right of the slide. Hallucinations, which I'm sure many of us have experienced, where you will get an answer or you'll get a response and it sounds really, it's so well written, but when you really, if you're familiar with the subject matter, you really dig into it, it just doesn't make sense, or it's sometimes just even made up. The second one is adversarial prompting or prompt injection, where even with the most like well-intentioned safety controls, people are finding ways to evade those guardrails of the large language model and get it to write, hate speech or comments or produce content that's with malicious intent. And then the third thing is not as extreme on the risk side as the first two, but still really important, which is that the output of these large language models does not really contain any references or citation. So when you think about it in the context of hallucinations, for instance, these systems will produce commentary or output, but there's no citations to it, it's very hard to discern the quality of the information you're receiving back and where to really pull on the thread and go next. So those are the three core areas we really wanted to address. And the third one is really important in large part because one of the most important aspects of O'Reilly.com is really its focus on experts and bringing forward the knowledge and expertise of experts to the community and the world at large. And that's really a collaborative process, right? You know, the publishers that O'Reilly.com works with, the authors the site works with, they're really brought into a collaboration process with editors to craft their books, provide their lessons, and there's a very high focus on making sure their work is credited in the first place and also compensated, even going back to the current answers engine. When you're looking at answers produced by that first system, authors and publishers are getting compensated. They're getting paid for their work because it's not easy to become an expert in your field. It's certainly not easy to write and share this knowledge. We wanted to make sure that we kept that focus as we explored what we could be building here. And so those principles really allowed us to say, at a cornerstone level, the focus here is really on the high quality content and expertise that's in the wider O'Reilly.com library at the core. And again, the people that are behind that content. And then what was interesting is you take that perspective, really sandwiching then expert knowledge, expert content into the language model itself. And the focus for us increasingly as we started to explore this was on synthesizing, not generating answers. So it's really to build on the expertise, build on the knowledge that's in the books and in the lessons, not to try to create it de novo from an open source knowledge base, but actually to build on the expertise that's there. And also to make sure that it was citation backed and that we were taking diligent efforts as we were generating the responses to fact check, to verify, to have a chain of thought analysis that I'll talk about later. And so that approach, surprisingly, as we'll get into when we look at the deep dive, that actually resolves a lot of hallucination and adversarial prompting risk, right? It's really taking the approach of saying, hey, what do we know? Where do we find it? Who wrote it? When was it published? That type of analysis chain resolves a lot of the hallucination risk, but it also minimizes a lot of the adversarial prompting. There's not a lot of risk in commentary. There's no commentary within the O'Reilly library that would be fed into something adversarial, right? There's no hate speech commentary. You cannot ask these types of questions. If anything, you'll find actually the counter to that often. And so that was really the biggest realization we had. So anyway, let's dive in. This is a good point to take an actual look at this. So let me share my screen really quick. So this is, as Adam was saying, this is an exploratory sandbox or playground that we've been building. It's not a product roadmap by any means, but it's a place in which we're really exploring some of these capabilities and ideas. So let me show what I mean here. So let me do, what is gradient descent? ? This is like the very first question we asked the first system. So this is what we started with this. So what is it doing? It's analyzed the question. It's understood whether or not it's got malicious intent or not. Does it need spell check correction? But then what it's actually doing then is the next step is it's doing effectively very fast snippet lookup across all the O'Reilly books. And then it's starting to construct a chain of thought analysis about how relevant are these to the question at hand. And then it's starting to generate commentary, but on a synthesized basis where it's actually taking in commentary from a specific book. We'll take a look at this in a section, but anytime you see one of these numbers within a bracket, that's really a citation link. That's a representation for now. And so you can see here, high level, what is gradient descent? This is a great metaphor for gradient descent from one of the books. 2 books comment on this in neural networks, learning rate, gradient descent in practice, conclusion. And these are the sources, right? And so if I click on one of the books, just like before, it will jump me directly into the text, right? But this time around, we're really much more in a synthesized version of the response. Again, you can really sort of get directly to the answers that are on your mind. But if you want to dig deeper into the content, if you want to know the sort of provenance or source of the commentary, that's here as well. And even on a more traditional search basis, what's adjacent to it, right? And things like that. So that's the first version of this for definitional search. Let's ask something that's more like a methods question. And so again, this is being sourced directly from the books, including code. And again, everything, there's a high focus on citation linking. What are the sources? And there's threading. You can ask follow-up questions. You can refer to, in the context of that gradient descent example, I could have said, how does this relate to back propagation? It would have understood that this refers to gradient descent. So that's what we've been tinkering with. And then what's underlying this is worth taking a minute to unpack.
Lucky. You should show the mini wiki feature. It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me show that really quick.
Yeah.
Here. All right. So what do you do beyond the answers, though, is an interesting question. So one of the ideas that we've been playing with is this idea of a meta wiki. So let me do this for word embeddings in NLP, right? What would a primer on this topic look like? So again, high-level digest around the topic, and then specific subtopics and concepts that are related, again, with sourcing. And then even going beyond this at an answers level and the meta wiki, we started asking ourselves, like, what would this look like if I could just apply this same snippet search to reading? So say I see this highlight, I want to dig in a little bit more deeply, select the text, very fast lookup of related snippets from across the library. Even taking this a few steps further, now we're starting to ask ourselves, what would it look like for us to analyze code, right? So this is a quick code paste. We're building these specialized commands that I showed earlier with the wiki. This one is called /code, and I've copy pasted in the code to analyze it. It's finding related discussions from across the O'Reilly sources, including code examples, and here you go. So that's really what we've been tinkering with and building out and exploring. One of the things that's really important to also unpack is that what we're finding is that the approach we're taking that's working is not making the model larger and larger, but actually building a lot more discretized, smaller models. And so really taking a lot of notes from anthropology and sociology and just biological ecosystems and asking ourselves, instead of having one Leviathan Oracle model, what would this look like as a multi-agent approach where you have different agents collaborating and checkpointing each other? And this is pretty much what we've arrived at, is actually having multiple, what we're just terming agents, checkpointing each other so that at the point of query, we can check, is this malicious? Then we can try to recontextualize the query in the context of the user. Then we can extend it further into the snippet search across all of the O'Reilly content, apply chain of thought analysis to determine which of these snippets is most relevant for you as the reader, and then start ranking, prioritizing those snippets, and then finally producing the answer. So that approach is allowing us to do a lot more checkpointing. It's very interesting that the quality of the output and the hallucination risk is really getting reduced out more and more. And so by grounding it and putting these checkpoints in, we're finding that you can just do a lot. And then, to Adam's point on the MetaWiki, again, we're just really asking ourselves, beyond just even simple questions and answers, what does it look like for there to be resources that are built on top of all the content in terms of primers and deep dives, this decoded capability of analyzing code that's in progress, and asking really what other resources are there across the site, the highlighter. And then the secondary things that we're working on are, again, really emphasizing the expertise on the site. How do we really bring forward and highlight and elevate the different experts? And then finally, where this is really the North Star that we've been thinking about the most together, is just what does a proactive version of this at an assistive level look like? Maybe you're really looking into the topic of hallucinations, and you're really going through the corpus and digging into it and reading and bookmarking. At a certain point, it would be pretty magical to have the system say, hey, it seems like you're really interested in investing in this topic, and for you to say, yeah, it's really the core of like making this one product I'm working on work, and then have that AI assistant go forward and actually produce a primer and update that primer and send you alerts and scout out even to like third-party validated sources for other commentary and discovery that it can help you with and assist you with. So that's pretty much it.
Thanks for that, Lucky. And yeah, Adam and Andy. There are a few questions that have come up.
Sure.
So how much human feedback and curating was involved to focus on synthesizing as opposed to generation?
In terms of like labeling the data, or in terms of like teaching and training the system?
I think labeling the data.
Yeah, that's a great question for Andy. I mean,
yeah, I think we don't, in this case, like, because we already has a pre-trained language model that help us to retrieval, and that is already pre-trained on a lot of technical content, including the question and answer pair, like you mentioned earlier. Yeah, so that actually gives us a lot of, I would say, semi-label data, and that is actually already enough for us to do a very good retrieval. Yeah, and then in terms of synthesize, it does not really require that much of label data. It needs a few good example of, okay, this is the syntax I want you to generate, like a long answer. I want you to generate the summary in certain format. Yeah, it's only need a few examples of that. It does not need a large number of label data.
Great. This is probably a question more for Adam. How much time and how many people are involved in this effort for O'Reilly, just from a kind of a deployment perspective?
Yeah, I mean, to build the application that I showed, O'Reilly Answers, which I saw a couple people asking the questions, is that available now? It is. If you have an active subscription, it is available now. Just click on Start Learning in the navigation, and you could start using it today. Some of the stuff that Lucky showed, as we talked about, is more exploratory. But for the answer stuff specifically, we did, like I said before, we at O'Reilly did the front end, and we relied on the Miso team for the APIs. And we had a small Scrum team working on it. I want to say, we have a few product people and a few engineers to the tune of 5 or 6 people to build the application, roughly, along with all the other things you'd expect, like QA, et cetera. And then internally, in terms of, there's a lot of interest. We have an internal machine learning team. We're doing a lot of exploratory stuff that we did not show here today. So there's like a diffuse interest across the team right now. And I wouldn't say there's any specific amount of people, but for Answer specifically, it was like like I said, 5, 6, 7 people that brought it to market.
Mm-hmm.
Lucky, there's a question. How many feet high are those book towers behind you stacked?
I don't know. I think that's got to be good. I mean, the scary thing, John, is I have like 7 of these around the house. I need to just make
scary, or is that a life goal, really?
It's more a life goal. I think like 6 feet.
Nice.
Yeah.
So maybe a little bit around the business impact of this, and since you all touched on this, can you share some of the kind of thought and thinking behind the business decision to pay authors if their book is used in the answer in one of the responses that O'Reilly Answers gives? And do you think it will change what kind of books authors focus on when writing?
That's a good question. I think it will potentially. It could be that the way that, I see this as a way for users to really interface with the entire corpus of the book library. So you could imagine as an author shaping your content in a way that is sort of mindful of that, and so that it is maybe more friendly to those systems over time. I don't think we completely know. In terms of compensating authors, that was really baked in from the beginning of the project. We always wanted to make sure that we were not, because we wanted to give meaty snippets. We wanted to give the user a real, not just a few sentences, but a few paragraphs to really give them the context to make a decision whether or not this was useful to the question that they answered. So given that we were creating this experience that really would demand some of the user's time and attention, it just made sense for us. And we were pulling that out of the original work into a more derivative experience. It just made sense to compensate authors accordingly. So that was always baked into at the very beginning.
Are there any guardrails against bias towards specific authors?
I mean, really, relevancy is the most important guardrail. I mean, we are looking at popularity of a book in terms of like how useful is this to the community as a whole and whatnot. But that's not the only signal for this at like a multi-objective ranking basis. And so we're mindful of this too. I think what's mostly interesting is also the long tail. Like we've noticed this more and more. There's just, these books are so rich. They might contain like an offhand reference to something that's actually very useful to a question, but really hits the nail on the head. And that is actually like really surprising at the end of the day. And so I think that the bias towards a specific author, I mean, there's no boosting or anything like that. It's all equal on relevance and other signals. And so, yeah, it's been fascinating to see though.
Yeah. Well, one final question. How do you get the bottom book out of one of those stacks?
This is all an illusion. This is actually like, it only looks like
all AI generated, right?
No, you just pull a book. Here, I'll take out Dune. It's not collapsing on me. I'm not buried underneath this, so yeah.
Well done. Well engineered.
Thank you. Not me, but yeah.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation. This was a fascinating look at what we can do now and what's to come. And look forward to seeing some of this come to fruition, hopefully very soon.
Thank you.
Well, that was our final session for today. I hope this event has really proven useful for you. It's really blown my mind, and I even knew kind of what was coming. My mind is spinning from all of the insights here, and a lot to think about. And we'll absolutely have to do one of these events again. And I'd also like to just throw out there, if you are working in this space and you have something interesting to share with the world, please don't hesitate to write us and tell us what you're working on, and maybe there's some way that we can work together on content. The easiest way to do that is to head over to O'Reilly.com/workwithus, and there you'll find some information on pitching ideas. We're actively acquiring in all of these areas, so if there's something interesting that you're working on, we'd love to hear from you. And with that, I'll wrap up my portion here. Thanks very much for being here. Thank you to all the presenters for their time and expertise and sharing with our audience. And that's it from me.